Last Chance U coach John Beam dies in campus shooting. The final footage. On a cool Oakland morning, when the fog settles low over the city and the streets feel quiet enough to hold their breath, the memory of Coach John Beam seems to move through the air like something living. You can almost picture him the way thousands of young men once did, walking with that unmistakable stride across the Laney College campus. Eyes sharp, voice steady, carrying the weight of a community on his shoulders and doing it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. For more than 40 years, he wasn't just a coach. He was Oakland's compass, a mentor who found promise where others saw problems, a lifeline for young men who arrived at his door with bruised confidence, rough edges, or broken circumstances. To them, Beam was the first person who ever said, "I see who you can be, and I'm not giving up on you." His impact reached far beyond football fields. It lived in late-night phone calls, in hard conversations, in second chances offered when the world had already turned its back. And though the headlines now speak of loss, those who truly knew him speak of something much larger: the lives he changed, the futures he built, and the young men who still carry his voice inside them. This is not a story about how Coach John Beam died. It is the story of how he lived and why Oakland will never forget him. Before the tributes poured in, before the news alerts flashed across screens, before a community found itself grieving a man whose absence felt impossible to comprehend, there was simply John Beam, not the public figure, not the Netflix personality, but the human being whose life unfolded in the quiet, steady rhythm of service. To understand his impact, you have to start with Oakland, a city where resilience is not just a trait, but a way of life. Here, the line between struggle and success can be heartbreakingly thin. Opportunities come unevenly, sometimes not at all. But in this landscape, John Beam carved out a space where possibility lived, where young men who had been written off, underestimated, or overlooked could walk onto a field and be met not with judgment, but with belief. Beam wasn't the kind of coach who shouted from the sidelines for show. He was the kind who listened, really listened, to the stories behind every young man who walked into his office. He had a way of hearing what they didn't say out loud. The fear of failure, the pressure from home, the weight of expectations they were too young to carry. And when they did speak, he didn't interrupt. He waited, gave space, then answered with a clarity that made everything feel possible again. His life was rooted in routine long before Netflix cameras arrived at Laney College. You'd often find him before sunrise, long before students even stirred, unlocking the athletic office, sorting through paperwork, or reviewing film alone in the quiet. To him, these hours weren't a burden. They were the foundation of doing the job right. He believed a coach should show up before anyone else, leave after everyone else, and stay present long after the whistle stopped blowing. But behind this discipline was a deeper truth. Beam didn't coach football to build athletes. He coached football to build men. And this mission guided every decision he made. Those close to him recall the subtle moments. The way he'd pause a practice, not because someone missed a play, but because he sensed someone's head wasn't in the right space. The way he held players accountable not through punishment, but through expectation, a standard that said, "You are better than the way you're acting right now, and I'm going to hold you to it." He didn't tolerate excuses. Not because he lacked empathy, but because he had seen too many young lives derailed by people who expected too little of them. Beam believed in second chances, but he also believed in honesty. If you were messing up, he told you. If you were capable of more, he demanded it. And if you needed someone to catch you before you fell too far, he was already standing right behind you. His connection to Oakland ran deeper than any single job title. He knew families, knew neighborhoods, knew the social currents pulling at his players' lives. Many of them were first-generation college students. Others came from homes where the path was clouded by instability. Some had grown up too fast. Some had been underestimated all their lives. But once you entered Beam's orbit, you weren't just an athlete. You were someone worth fighting for Former players often say the same thing, almost word for word, without knowing others have said it too. Beam believed in me before I believed in myself. It wasn't just his guidance. It was his consistency. He showed up to graduations. He attended family gatherings when invited. He sat beside players in difficult meetings. There were stories whispered through decades of him quietly paying for a student's meal plan, helping someone find housing, or staying late to make sure they had what they needed to stay in school. He never did it for recognition. In fact, he preferred no one know it all. And when Netflix came calling, Beam hesitated. He didn't see himself as a celebrity. He didn't need a camera to validate a life's work already carved out across thousands of futures. But he agreed not for the attention, but because he knew what visibility could mean for his players. The world saw a tough, no-nonsense coach, with sharp edges and an unshakable heart. What they didn't see were the evenings after filming, when he'd sit quietly in his office, answering messages from former players, checking in on grades, making calls to coaches across the country trying to secure scholarships. Beam lived in two worlds, the public one that praised him, and the private one where the real work happened. And in that private world, the roots of his legacy ran deep. Before the tragedy, before the headlines, before the loss that would ripple outward and leave an ache still felt today, Coach Beam was simply this: a man who carried the hopes of others with a devotion few could ever match. A man who built futures, one conversation, one practice, one second chance at a time. A man whose life was defined not by personal achievement, but by the success of those he lifted to higher ground. He was the heart of Oakland football, the steady hand behind countless transformations, and a mentor whose presence shaped generations. This was the world before everything changed. A world shaped and profoundly strengthened by John Beam. Thursday mornings at Laney College usually carried a particular kind of energy, that mix of routine and anticipation that comes from a campus where futures are constantly being rebuilt. Students moved across the courtyard in clusters, the early sun casting long shadows over the concrete walkways. Some hurried to class, backpacks bouncing behind them. Others stood in small circles, laughing, arguing, dreaming out loud about the kinds of tomorrows they hoped were still possible. And somewhere among them, as he had been for decades, was Coach John Beam. To most people passing by, he looked like any other staff member walking the grounds, but anyone who knew him truly knew him recognized the small details. The purpose in his step, the way he scanned the campus, like a caretaker, keeping watch over something precious, the way students would brighten when he appeared. He wasn't just an administrator or a coach. He was part of the architecture of the place. That morning felt no different. There was no warning, no tension in the air, nothing to foreshadow the violence that would break the day in half. In the athletic department office, Beam had been catching up on paperwork, going over schedules, and answering messages from players, some current, some former. He was preparing for the next round of practices, the next set of academic checks, the next group of young men he planned to push, challenge, and protect. He left the building just before midday, heading across campus the way he had thousands of times. Maybe he was on his way to speak with a colleague. Maybe he planned to check in on players between classes. Maybe he was simply taking a moment to breathe outside, appreciating the familiar rhythm of a place he'd given so much of his life to. But somewhere nearby, in the same network of paths and sidewalks, another man was moving too. Students later recalled hearing what they first thought were fireworks, sharp cracks that echoed unnaturally against the concrete buildings. But confusion quickly turned to panic. People ducked, scattered, ran without knowing where they were going or what they were fleeing. In the chaos, one truth emerged with horrifying clarity. Coach John Beam had been shot. Campus security rushed toward the scene. Students called 911 through shaking hands. Others froze, unable to process the sight of a man so deeply woven into their community now lying on the ground. Several recognized him immediately. Some cried out his name. Others whispered it, as though saying it aloud might anchor them in a reality that suddenly felt impossible. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They worked urgently, voices firm but calm, their hands moving with the practiced precision of people who refused to let hope slip too quickly. Beam was still breathing when they lifted him onto the stretcher. His pulse was faint, his skin pale. But he was alive. And for those who knew him, that was enough. Because if anyone could fight his way back from the edge, it was John Beam, the man who had spent his life teaching others how to keep going when the world felt impossibly heavy. As he was rushed toward the ambulance, someone called out to him, a student, a player, someone who loved him. "Hang on, coach," they said. "We're right here. We're not letting you go." But as the sirens faded into the distance, a deeper silence settled over Laney College. Students who had once walked the campus with confidence now felt the ground shift beneath them. Faculty gathered in stunned whispers. And in offices where Beam's laughter had so often echoed, there was only an aching stillness. People didn't know yet exactly what had happened. They didn't know who the suspect was. They didn't know why a man who gave so much had been targeted. But they knew one thing, with absolute certainty. Nothing about this felt random, and nothing about this felt fair. That afternoon, as police began piecing together the timeline, reviewing surveillance footage, interviewing witnesses, securing the scene, a cloud of disbelief hung over the campus. News spread quickly, but understanding did not. Many refused to believe the rumors until they heard them confirmed. Others wandered the grounds, replaying the morning in their minds, trying to remember anything that might have seemed strange, anything that might have hinted that something was wrong. But the truth was devastating in its simplicity. A normal day had been shattered. A safe place had been violated. A pillar of the community had been attacked without warning. And in a city that Coach Beam had dedicated his life to uplifting, the weight of that reality pressed hard on everyone who heard it. There is never a right time for tragedy. But there are moments that feel especially cruel moments, when the presence of a single person seems so permanent that the idea of harm feels unthinkable. For Oakland, for Laney College, and for the countless lives Beam had touched, this was one of those moments. At the final footage, we explore stories like these, not to sensationalize, but to illuminate the profound human truths within them. Every tale, whether it centers on scientific breakthroughs, chilling mysteries, or true crime, carries lessons about empathy, morality, and the enduring quest for justice. Stories such as Watson's compel us to reflect, to question, and to confront the complexities of human nature, and in doing so, they remind us why history, memory, and accountability matter. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to the final footage, where each episode immerses you in real-life stories that are gripping, cinematic, and thought-provoking. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that challenges your understanding of the world and the people who inhabit it. Through these narratives, we honor lives, illuminate truths, and confront uncomfortable realities. John Beam's story is one chapter among many, but it is a reminder that every life, every discovery, and every moral reckoning leaves an indelible mark on history. As we explore more cases, more mysteries, and more stories of human triumph and failure, we invite you to reflect deeply, empathize fully, and witness history as it unfolds one story at a time. The legacy of John Beam's complicated, layered, and undeniable. It reminds us of the heights humans can reach and the responsibilities that come with that ascent. It is a cautionary tale, a celebration of discovery, and an invitation to reckon with the human condition all at once.